basically, Marchioni is not done looking for a merger, looking for an alliance with General Motors, right? He's just moving down from the board level to try and put some pressure on shareholders.
Right. He's trying to get shareholders, particularly the large institutions who are typically at the top 5 or 10 on every major company shareholder list, to see if they're interested, to see if they would help him pressure Mary Barra and the General Motors board to consider talking with him about some kind of merger. That is going to be a tough one to pull off. So given that the odds may be pretty low on that, he's kind of going down his list of what other car makers might be willing to do a deal with him. And there's Volkswagen, there's Renault Nissan, there are Korean and Japanese car makers. It's not a long list, and it's not there's no one on that list who jumps out and says, yeah, they're going to do this. But that's where he's casting his eyes now.
And, Jeff, that having been said, Mr. Marchioni, he still has not given up on the idea of trying to lure GM to the table.
Would love to see an institutional investor back up his bill or back up his plan, or maybe someone like an Ackman or a Dan Loeb or someone like that to take a big stake. But generally speaking, those guys like to move in and move out quickly. And, you know, Bill Ackman's effort he had last year with Valiant and Allergan didn't work very well. So I'm a little skeptical that he's going to get that kind of support from someone there.
Right, I was going to ask you, you know, in your career covering mergers and acquisitions, have you ever seen this strategy work out well, where a smaller company that wants to essentially merge or get taken over puts pressure on shareholders of a bigger board that isn't interested?
No.
No.
To be very candid, no. You usually aren't going to see this, and this would be the minnow trying to swallow the whale or convince the whale to come over and play with the minnow a little bit. So, yeah, he moves on to Peugeot, he moves on to Volkswagen, he moves on maybe to Renault and Nissan. But
Peugeot and Volkswagen is the story of another minnow and a whale, right? I mean, David, Volkswagen is a massive, massive company. Peugeot, Citroën, I mean, give me some scale here. How big is this? How serious a partner would they be?
So Peugeot sells about 2.9, let's call it 3 million cars a year. They're growing in China pretty well, and they have an alliance with Dongfeng. But that's why it's sort of the last ditch for Sergio, because it does give him more scale. He sells about 4.5 million vehicles a year, but not the kind of GM or Volkswagen, 10 million plus kind of vehicle sales every year that he's looking for. That's why, they're kind of further down the list. Volkswagen has also done a lot of merger and acquisition work. They bought plenty of brands from Seat and Skoda, which are mass market, on all the way up to the luxury stuff like Bentley. So, yeah. And they can make these deals work. They sort of run Volkswagen and Audi and their other brands as sort of a confederation, as opposed to a centrally controlled kind of company. So they can make these things work pretty well, and they're pretty good at integrating. But right now, they've said they're not really interested. Yeah. And the other question for if you're VW is, why would I buy at the top of the market? Why wouldn't I wait until Sergio is in deeper trouble and his company is worth less to go in and negotiate a better price, if that's what I wanted to do?
Yeah, Jeff, it was back in April. Mr. Marchioni was speaking to the investors. He said the entire auto industry needs to consolidate. They need to spread out the cost here. Is the entire auto industry with him?
So let's go back even further. So he brought it up in April, but back in 2009 when the government was running GM and Chrysler, they came really close to putting those two together. So yeah. they saw the fundamental logic 5 years ago, 6 years ago, before the market came back. So there's a bullheadedness, if you will, within the auto industry, especially when they're at the top of the cycle, where no one wants to admit they would be better off if they merged with somebody else and stripped out some of their own operations. And Sergio's trying to make his way past that bullheadedness, if you will, and find a partner who is willing to partner up now when we're at the top of the market, and maybe you don't need as many job cuts as you would in a year or two.
I think the most recent mergers in the U.S. auto industry before Fiat Chrysler didn't turn out so well. The last one, the Chrysler, for example, Daimler Chrysler. David, let me ask you a last question here, and I tweeted this at you earlier, but why wouldn't Toyota be a good candidate for a partnership with Sergio? They don't have a lot of operations in Europe. He doesn't have a lot of operations in Asia. Wouldn't it be a match made in heaven?
I think you'd have some real cultural issues. Toyota doesn't like to just go out and acquire. They do partnerships very well. They're partnered up with Daihatsu for very small vehicles. They're partnered up with Mazda for technology. They have had a partnership with GM for manufacturing in the past, but they're just not a big acquirer. What Toyota likes to do is go into a market and do everything the Toyota way and just sprout up plants and grow it organically. That way the Toyota way of manufacturing and engineering and doing business and that culture just kind of propagates on its own without having to buy somebody else's stuff and retrofit it. They don't like to take used cars, put them in the shop and fix them. They want to make them themselves.